Good morning, everyone. The program will begin in just a few moments. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Bowman, Senior Director for Common Sense in Los Angeles, and you're here for our Parent Talk. We have parents tuning in from all around the country, and we're so glad you'll be able to gather with us virtually. By now, you've had a few weeks to test your own virtual learning systems, and by that I mean Zoom and your kitchen table. So perhaps you're ready to make some adjustments. We're here to help you. Before we get started, just some housekeeping about today's program. The panel will speak for 30 minutes or so and then answer questions. We're going to do our best to get as many of them up here as we can. And today we're especially thrilled to have Lisa Ling with us to guide our discussion. So I'd love to start by introducing Lisa, and she'll then introduce our other parenting experts. Okay, Lisa is a veteran broadcast journalist. I'm sure you all know who she is. We're thrilled to have her with us. She's the host of This Is Life on CNN, which is in its 7th season, and she's taken a special interest in tech and the family over her career. That's because she has 2 daughters, ages 7 and 4, and she lives here in Los Angeles. Welcome, Lisa.
So much for having me. Yes, I do have 2 daughters, 7 and 4, and if my 7-year-old barges in at some point through this, I ask your forgiveness in advance, but I know that most people who are watching can probably relate, because so many of us are homeschooling our kids or have our kids at home and are doing distance learning with them, and there are so many issues that have arisen for me and so many parents across the country and really around the world as we try and navigate this kind of uncharted territory. I can say that so far this term, distance learning has gotten a lot better than it was last term for my 7-year-old. I don't know how it's been for all of you, but we have 2 experts on this webinar today who are going to help guide us and try and implement best practices, because I know, I think it's fairly confident to say that most of us are feeling challenged, particularly the moms out there who I know are shouldering a lot. So let me tell you about our guests today, our panelists. We have Chrissy Elgersma, who is a senior editor of social media and learning resources here at Common Sense. Chrissy was an educator for 16 years, teaching all ages. She has a 10-year-old daughter who's probably also doing distance learning in another room in her house. She works as a writer for both the parenting and education side of Common Sense, doing social media, concerning social media concerns, as well as digital learning. So welcome, Chrissy, to you. We also have Dr. Dolly Klock, who is a family medicine physician and founder of Adolessons. She has a 17-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, and she's been working with parents, teens, and tweens around really important issues like puberty, sexuality, body image, social media, mental health, and more. So let us get started. I want to welcome both of you, first of all, and knowing that you probably have kids in your home as well, I just want to ask you how you're both doing, and how's the distance learning going? Dr. Klock, I'll start with you.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, everyone. So good to see you. I'm doing okay. It has not been easy, for sure. I have, like Lisa said, I have a 17-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter. My daughter's down the hall, holed up, doing her online schooling. My son has commandeered both the family room and the dining room somehow for his schoolwork. I work from home, which means that every time I finally can focus on a project, I have a teenager who happens to be on break and they just want to come say hi or see if I have time to have a little snack with them or whatever. So it is, it feels chaotic and disruptive. I'm also loving having them around more. So there's all these conflicting feelings. I also am seeing firsthand the effects of kids who are really on screens a lot more than they ever were. And so there's a lot for us to talk about.
And I really hope that we can talk a lot about that today, because for me, before COVID, this was a big concern for me. And I really wanted to start a movement of parents who would band together to try and prevent our kids from having so much access to technology, because I've always believed that it has had a detrimental impact on their brains and on their mental health, because it's so unlimited. So we're going to be talking about that. But Chrissy, I want to get to you first to ask you just how things are going. How's distance learning going for you in your home?
It is going. My spouse is actually a principal, and my daughter goes to that school. So it's sort of a combo platter of different types of stress and challenges. The principaling is happening on the bottom floor, and my daughter and I are on the top floor. And in fact, I just heard her practicing her ukulele a little bit. So we may get serenaded a little bit. I'm not sure. We'll find out. It's going to be exciting. But I'm definitely feeling all the challenges myself as well.
Well, and I think I can speak for all of us to say that despite how challenging it is, we are pretty lucky that we can even have our kids in other rooms to be able to do this. We know that there are so many families where who are living in cramped quarters and are experiencing those kinds of challenges as well. So anyway, let's kind of start from the beginning. I want to give you a little scenario. It's Monday morning, right? And we're about to begin our week. Where do we even begin, or where should we begin? And when I ask this question, I'm talking about the kind of schedule that we should have our kids on and motivation. How should we be handling that? Dr. Klock?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm all about sort of being prepared, setting ourselves up for success. Every back to school season, I post the same thing on my Instagram. It's a picture of my son's backpack at the front door. And so this is from, pre-pandemic times. And the slogan is on the floor by the door the night before. And so I think that our families have felt such a loss of the structure that normally comes with sending our kids to school. And so we still need to get ready. So maybe it's a Monday morning huddle, maybe it's a Sunday evening. What does the week ahead look like? But I really think we need to be creative in creating a schedule. We can talk about details of what that looks like. But kids find comfort in having consistency and expectations, right? And so I think we need to focus on basic things like making sure they're getting enough sleep, having fairly consistent wake times and sleep times, getting dressed in the morning. I really think that is helpful in putting us in the right mindset, making sure they're having their breakfast, getting the snacks and the lunches ready, maybe packing a lunchbox just like you did in the regular times, making sure they have their own designated workspace. Some kids are lucky and they have their own, but like you said, Lisa, they have a separate spot in the house to do it. But if you're sharing space, just making sure that kids have a designated spot where they can do their schoolwork, and then just having the links ready and organized for their classes, having the passwords ready, just to minimize all the stress of that last second scramble of I don't know how to get online. And then there's so much that we can talk about in terms of minimizing distractions, and then just making sure they're getting breaks and they're getting exercise and time outside, and time for some kind of in real life personal interactions, whether it's with family members or a small group of friends. But they need structure.
And Chrissy, I'll ask you the same question. How do we maintain that schedule and keep our kids motivated when we're all kind of operating in this within the confines of one unit?
I echo everything that Dr. Klock said. I think that regularity and the boundaries around time and having expectations around how the day is going to go and routine is extremely important. And then, just some small things like having a sign on your door when you are inaccessible. My daughter actually crochets, so she crocheted a little sign that has a happy face and a sad face, and I can flip it around. So if I'm inaccessible, I'm in a meeting, then it's a signal to her it's not a good time to come in. But then we can have some scheduled break times together to have that connection, which is, it's a nice opportunity to be able to have that. I would also add, if your kid has other devices, they should surrender those at the beginning of the day, and not have them in their workspace, because that can lead to a lot of distraction. And then in terms of motivation, I think the encouragement and the, catching them doing cool stuff, making sure to discuss what's happening in their classes and what they've learned, that all of that is still really important to stay involved in your kids' online learning, even though we're with them all the time. Still kind of building on that learning, and getting them enthused about it is really important. And posting their work if there's a possibility to do that. All of those things are just as important as they were before, even though we're caught up in a lot of different challenges. But I think that can help aid motivation also.
It's great information. We're going to be giving you all some tips throughout this webinar, and the first one is about setting a schedule. Now, before COVID, Common Sense counseled parents on how to manage screen time. Again, this was a huge, huge issue for me, how to get our kids off devices, because to me, these devices, they're not just phones, they are supercomputers, and the things that they can access are sometimes just entirely inappropriate for their age. And now we're on screens all the time. So can you give us some suggestions on how to manage this? And, when our kids have breaks, when they're on their devices, how to, sometimes I think it gives them license. They think, well, if I am spending all these hours learning, that means I can just have unlimited access to this device. So can you give us some suggestions on how we should be handling this? Chrissy, I'll start with you.
I think if there aren't already really clear expectations in place, I think that's a great place to start. It's never too late to have a family media plan. And I think now more than ever to have expectations around how we're going to try to find balance. And balance right now looks a little bit different than it did before, in that kids are on screens all day. That said, it is important for them to have screen-free time, to give their eyes a break, to get their bodies moving, all of those things. So I think setting those expectations and saying, these are the screen-free times of the day. When you are on a screen doing something fun, let's make sure that it's really high quality stuff. So whatever you're watching or playing, it has some learning component or has some element of creativity that's involved. So really high quality stuff. Make sure you're discussing their screen time, because then that connection can come around it. So it becomes more of a social experience rather than just a solitary one. And go out and try to do stuff together outside, physical things, so that screen time is quality, and also we're trying to find the best balance that we can right now.
Chrissy, you say that you should have family media contracts. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. So generally what we advocate for is to have sort of a contract that you can post somewhere in your house, maybe on the fridge. And we have some available on our site. The AAP has some that you can create. Generally, co-creation works best. So to sit down, have a family meeting and sit down together and come up with some expectations and rules for everyone as a team, not just, top down, here's how you're going to handle screens, but everybody. We're going to have device-free dinners. We pause for people. So I get off my phone. If you come in and want to tell me something, I will attend to you instead of looking at my phone. And same when they're on a device and you come in to tell them something, we have to pause for people. So things like that you can build into a contract that you then all sign and post somewhere. And kids can remind us, they love to call us out when we are not walking the walk. So keep each other in check and make sure, it's a team approach. And then you can, I think, find that balance together, rather than always feeling like you're trying to get your kid off a device.
And Dr. Klock, how would you suggest people manage their kids' screen time?
Yeah, it's so interesting because when the pandemic began, I found that many families, my own included, sort of liberalized their screen time rules because this was how our kids were able to socialize, and it still is largely. And so I think we still need to have that flexibility, but at the same point, there need to be boundaries. And what I'm hearing from parents, and even what I heard pre-pandemic, was I find many times parents, once they've let the genie out of the bottle, right, they can't figure out how to put it back in. And we have to remember as parents that if something's not working, it's okay to make a change, right? If we said, go for it, you can be online. Yes, you can get on that social media app that I never allowed before, but I want you to feel connected. And now you see that your child is actually struggling because of it. You can sort of try to put the toothpaste back in the bottle. You really can. And so when I talk to parents about it, just echoing what Chrissy says, it's really about striking that balance. And I find that it's helpful to involve kids in this decision making to some extent, remembering that you are the parent, of course, but to really sort of, again, it comes back to that schedule a little bit. Look at, like, this is how much sleep we're supposed to get, which if you're an elementary schooler is 9 to 12 hours. If you're a teen, it's 8 to 10 hours. This is how much time you need for school, for homework. You need to get an hour a day of exercise. You need to have some time outside, some time with real friends, some, help around the house. We're going to have this much time set aside for our dinner. And then what's left? How much time is left? And how are we going to structure that time? And if that's your recreational screen time, then what is it? Because it's really the content that's so much more important than the amount of time or the actual platform that they're on. And so really making sure that screen time is social, right? Or that it is creative. There's a big difference between mindlessly scrolling through Instagram and, FaceTiming with a friend while you're baking cookies together, or even maybe online gaming with friends where you're being super social and playing Minecraft or something like that. So finding that balance is the most important thing.
I know something that's important for you, Dr. Klock, is talking about the myth of multitasking.
Mm-hmm.
Can you comment a bit about that?
Yeah. So this is really important because our kids think they're so good at it, right? And so what happens is they're online, they're doing their homework, or maybe they're even in class, and then they have a second screen where they are chatting with their friends, or they're gaming or something. So they're trying to do multiple things. And I think parents get so frustrated by this. And by the way, parents try to do this multitasking too. The way our brains are designed is such that we cannot do two cognitively complex tasks simultaneously. So you can walk down the street and chew gum at the same time because neither of those are cognitively complex tasks. But if you're trying to be in a classroom while you're chatting, what you're really doing is switching tasks in your brain. And so that's doable, but it comes at the price of efficiency. And so where I see this a lot is, and this was even pre-pandemic, is the kid who it's taking forever for them to get their homework done. And then you figure out that it's because they're doing so many other things at the same time. And this can be really frustrating to kids. They don't want their homework to take forever. So I think if we take the time to explain some of this to them, then sometimes that, depending on their age, they can get on board with this, but it's also our job as parents to help them, particularly when they're younger. And that does mean get rid of the second screens. Like they don't, when it's schoolwork and homework time, they don't need another device in their room. When it's out of sight, it's out of mind in a better way.
Well, that's a perfect time to put up our second tip, which is not all screen time is equal. But these are great tips that you both are giving to us, but we're all so overwhelmed. We're juggling so much. How much can we even monitor? Because it's so important for us to have a presence in our kids' digital lives. It's so crucial because we don't know when they're alone in their room what kinds of sites that they are going to. So are there ways that we can monitor our kids' digital, their lives and their behavior without being on top of them all the time? Chrissy, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think, having conversations about what they're doing, especially starting as young as possible so that you can stay involved, And sometimes with older kids, asking what their friends are doing online in sort of a casual, non-confrontational way, you can get a little bit more information out of a kid about what's the new hot thing, or what's happening in terms of the online space, social space where they live some of their social lives. And then in addition to that, if you're feeling like it would be helpful to have some device-based control, both Android and iOS devices have built-in parent controls. So there's screen time on iOS and there's Family Link on Android devices. And those are some tools that can help you enforce those boundaries that you've already talked about. So it's less about, I'm going to shut down the Wi-Fi if you don't comply, and more about, okay, this is the amount of time that we agree that you can spend on TikTok or whatever. And after that amount of time, screen time says, that's it. You can't access that app anymore. And so that's a way, if, you cannot be constantly on top of the expectations and this is how much time and et cetera, but the device can aid you in doing that as well. And I'll just also say around screen time, to again kind of build on what Dr. Klock was saying, instead of you get an hour, if you can negotiate a stopping place that is logical and makes sense to a kid, especially in something like Minecraft, that is, if you just set an arbitrary time limit, it can really kind of trigger a confrontation, because kids don't feel like they're finished, and nobody likes to be interrupted when they're not finished. So saying, okay, what do you need to finish so that you can stop this session of Minecraft, and then try to move on from that. But sometimes I say, you finish this, or 5 minutes pass, whichever comes first. And then that's the negotiated stopping place.
Dr. Klock, any thoughts on how you can monitor without being on top of your kids all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of this too is just having open conversation, and for us to talk about our own failures in this arena, because I think all of us as adults have also been victim to the distraction that is so easily had. And so I think when we're real with our kids, especially as they get older, I think that goes a long way. There are definitely lots of tricks, like Chrissy mentioned, and they're, filtering devices and all of this, but I think that, at the end of the day, our kids get savvy as they get older, especially, and they figure the workarounds. And so there's something to be said for letting them mess up too, and learn from those mistakes, and learning that they didn't get their work done in time because they were, online with their friends when they should have been doing their homework, or they didn't get the grade that they wanted. So again, I think we have to, we're all growing, and we're all learning through this, not just in pandemic times, but just, in this digital world.
Yeah, again, before COVID, it was really important for me to try and model my behavior with my device. And when I would come home, I would put it away and not take it out, and really spend time with my kids. But now that we're all working from home, it's increasingly harder to do that, but it's possible. It is possible to figure out ways to model proper behavior with your device. Like if you do have to work, tell them, I'm going into my office, and I close the door so they don't see me on it all the time, when the time I spend with them is really kind of unadulterated time that I am able to spend. So it is possible. I want to talk about something very important. Our tip number 3 is prioritizing your family's mental health. Dr. Klock, I'll start with you. We've been talking so much about mental health these days. I mean, there's just so much that's going on, and so much uncertainty, and our role as parents is to try and provide comfort, right? And take care of our children. But yet so many of us feel like we don't know what's going on, right? So can you help us figure out ways to do exactly that, to prioritize our mental health before a crisis emerges?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought it up, Lisa, because it's so important to me always, but especially right now. And people are struggling. And I have to say that I do a lot of speaking events for schools and organizations, and usually it's on a whole wide variety of topics. But this fall, almost every request is about pandemic parenting, mental health, how to recognize mental health concerns, in your kids. And people are really struggling. So I just want to say to the parents out there watching, if you feel like your kid is having a hard time, or you feel like you are having a hard time, you are absolutely not alone. The thing that I love about the fact that I'm getting all these requests is that I do feel like we're chipping away a little bit at the stigma around mental health, which is so important. So I think we just have to be honest with ourselves and recognize that this is a very difficult time. Families are all struggling in one way or another, and it looks different in every family. And I think as parents, we really have to take care of ourselves. And that, parental self-regulation, emotional self-regulation is so huge always. It always has been. And parents are really stressed right now. They're stressed about the pandemic. They're stressed about all the social justice issues that have come up. They're the political scene, the virus itself, everything, kids online learning. And so I think we need to make sure that we're getting enough sleep so we can help regulate our emotions, make sure that if we're really struggling, that we're asking for help. And same thing with our kids. If we see that they're having a hard time, don't be afraid to ask. I get a lot of requests, like for referrals to therapists. Don't forget to talk to your child's pediatrician or family medicine physician. Loop them into that mental health piece as well. But it's really important that we talk about this openly.
Chrissy, are there resources that you can suggest when thinking or dealing with families' mental health?
Yes. I think a lot of what I've been hearing on sort of the learning side of things is that parents are feeling very anxious around learning loss and kids falling behind. And I think that anxiety can get translated to kids. They just sort of pick up what we're putting down, and anxiety can be kind of contagious, especially when we're all in the same space all the time. So I think trying to let go of some of those concerns and remember that just sort of living through this time and learning from different opportunities that are coming up as a result of this, even just strategies to manage mental health and to be in touch and self-regulate and all of those things, those are very important life lessons. And there's no better time than now to be practicing those things. And so, in terms of digital tools, there are lots of meditation apps, and there are lots of tools that you can use together as a family, or start sort of a quiet time together. But I think really, being in touch with where you are, realizing that your kid may be in tune with what you are feeling, trying to be honest about that, and sharing how you're working with that and modeling it for them, I think comes with a lot of value and is helpful for everybody in the household.
Chrissy, I know you've been a big fan of Catherine Newman's book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think actually Dr. Klock knows. She knows
Dr. Klock
pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah. But before that, just on this mental health piece, I do have some great resources for parents. My favorite, and this is a new one, is Dr. Lisa D'Amore, who many may know. She's the author of Untangled and Under Pressure. She's a psychologist and just an incredible resource. She just launched a podcast that's called Ask Lisa, and it's a psychology of parenting. It is fantastic, and many of the recent episodes that have been specifically around this, just the emotional stuff that comes up during the pandemic. So that's a really great resource. Another good resource is Child Mind Institute. There are lots of articles on there that I think could be really helpful to people. And a third is, especially if there are any school administrators on here, there was a documentary came out a couple years ago called Angst. It's distributed by IndieFlix. It's a fantastic conversation starter. It's all about kids and anxiety. So yes.
Well, Dr. Klock, while we're on this, because I think it's so important for parents, just because kids have not been in school in so long and not had the opportunity to interact with their peers, what are some signs that parents should look for, that should propel them to maybe want to ask for help?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. There are many things to look for, and any one of these alone is not it. First of all, the number one thing is, as a parent, absolutely trust your instincts. I will always value a parent's instincts. If you think your kid is in a deep, dark place, please get help. Call your pediatrician, family physician, mental health professional, and get them some help. But there are certain things that you can look at: sleep disturbance, if they're not sleeping well, or they're sleeping much more than usual, if they're really withdrawing, and it is normal for many adolescents, just as part of their independence, to kind of withdraw. But if this is a new change for them and they're really becoming more isolated, if they're not deriving pleasure from the types of activities that they normally did. Again, I know some of their activities are on hold, but if you're seeing a real change there, if they're spending a lot of time crying, or seeming very, very depressed, or really, really anxious much of the time. Some kids will present, when they're struggling emotionally, they present with physical symptoms. So if they're having new stomach aches or new headaches, obviously you're going to go, have them seen medically to evaluate that. But sometimes that could be a sign that there's something going on emotionally. A big change in their grades. Absenteeism. So these are the kids, not just the kids who complain about going to school, whether it's in person or online, but the ones who just outright refuse to do so. New substance use, or an increase in substance use. Many kids and adults will actually self-medicate, as a way to deal with their undiagnosed mental health issues. Obviously, any concerns about if a child is talking about dying or not wanting to live, this has to be taken very, very seriously. This is September. It's actually National Suicide Prevention Month, and so there's been a lot of talk about this. There's a big, myth that talking about suicide will put the idea in a child's mind, and that is not the case. It's actually the opposite. If they're thinking about it and no one's talking to them about it, they can feel very alone. If we talk about it, they feel supported. So any one of those could be a red flag. And what's also important is if you see these changes and it's going on for more than just a few days, if we're talking a couple weeks or more, absolutely, those kids need to get help.
So important. I want to just show our final two tips, because I really want to get to questions, because I know many of you have them. Our fourth tip is, don't let a good crisis go to waste. There are so many resources that are available to parents, and if you go to Common Sense, you can find a multitude of resources, and we really encourage you to do that. I mean, Common Sense has been like a Bible for me when I have questions about so many different things. And our last tip is wide open school. Chrissy, can you talk a little bit about that idea of wide open school?
Sure. In partnership with some other organizations, we have created a website, Wide Open School, which curates lots of free resources in different subject areas, and has tips for parents, has tips for teachers around distance learning. So it's a great resource. There's a daily plan that you can check into. So if your kid needs anything supplemental, if they don't have a set curriculum through their school, it's a great place to go to look for free educational resources.
And Dr. Klock, I wonder if you could talk about the crisis not going to wait briefly before we go to questions.
Yes, I mean, I think that Chrissy mentioned earlier about there's so much concern about educational loss, academic loss. But I see that we have such an opportunity right now with our kids around more to teach them some really basic life skills. And this is to your question earlier about the Catherine Newman book. So there's a great book for kids that just came out a couple months ago, and it's called How to Be a Person by Catherine Newman. It has how to clean a bathroom, how to boil eggs, how to create a budget and basic finances. And I think this is such a fantastic sort of guideline. You could get this as sort of and try out all those little practices with your kids and engage them in it, because there is so much to learn. And also, we are in a crisis, but I just think that if we kind of reframe it in our minds and see, rather than waiting for things to go back to normal or wishing things were the way they were, if we just admit, like, this is where we are right now, and how do we make the best of it, and how do we help our kids grow during this time?
That's great advice. I'm so sorry, I misspoke. I meant a good crisis, not going to waste. I said wait, but it is so true. I think that there are real learning opportunities through all of this, and also just conveying to our kids that we are all in this together and it will pass. And even the prominent psychologist from Harvard recently told me that it's really also important to just ask your kids how they feel about everything that's happening. That actually made me really emotional, because I really haven't done a good job about asking about how they feel about being in the midst of a pandemic or these social justice movements that are happening. We've been talking around it and trying to tell them almost, about almost how to feel when we really need to validate and acknowledge their own feelings. So I think that's something that's really important to do. We are wanting to take some questions from you all. So if you have them, please feel free to put them in the comment section, and we will try to get to as many as we can. So Stephanie from LA has a third grader, and she's asking, any tips for maintaining my child's well-being? How can you keep kids motivated? We sort of touched on that, but Chrissy, do you have any thoughts on that?
I will just advocate for humor, silliness, and playfulness. Especially for that age of kid and younger, as much as you can make things into a game. And sometimes with kids' homework, if you come up with the silliest answers, they are right there to correct you, which is a great way to get them to show you what they know. But there's no better time if you can be playful and silly and laugh. I think just keeping that levity as much as possible right now is a great motivator and a connector, and it helps with everybody's well-being.
Dr. Klock, do you have any secrets for keeping kids motivated?
Well, I think I love the humor. I think that is absolutely key. I think also helping them find purpose, so it could be just, at that age, some chores around the house, but also giving them some say, letting them have some choice around what order they want to do their homework, or which of the household chores they would most enjoy, helping out with. Is there someone that maybe an older neighbor down the street that they could help them, bring in the newspaper or walk their dog or something like that. So I think that giving them something else to do besides just schoolwork is very helpful.
That's great. We have time for a couple more questions. Jordan is asking, my young kid almost thinks this is too normal. I'm a little worried about the dramatic social shift when he goes back to school. Any thoughts on that, Chrissy?
I have been thinking about this myself, just around what it's going to be like when we start to shift back to some kind of normalcy. And I think, at least for me, I think staying present and in the moment right now. And if this is feeling normal, I think we can run with that ball right now. And when we get to a place where it's time to go back, I think we cross that bridge when we come to it. And I'm not sure if I would like to hear what Dr. Klock has to say, but I think that's where I am at on that. It's just sort of staying present and in the moment is the best coping strategy for me right now.
I'm curious about what Dr. Klock would say about that too. So,
well, I will tell you that it's so interesting because there are kids who are really, really missing out on the social piece. And there are others who are maybe a little bit naturally more introverted who are pretty comfortable in the situation. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think, we need to take the cues from the kids to some extent. And if they're doing okay right now, I think that's great. And they don't necessarily need to have a huge pile of friends. If they have, one friend, or even if they're younger, even a sibling that they're really connected with and they're having some chance for socialization there, I wouldn't be so worried right now. I do think that it's going to be an interesting adjustment when we sort of re-enter for the kids and the adults alike. And to Chrissy's point, we'll deal with that when we get there. I think if parents are concerned that their kids are a little too comfortable and are, not wanting to reach out socially, then there are ways for parents to help scaffold that a little bit. Maybe it's just a matter of, if there's a way to safely outdoors have another small family gather, or one other friend over, and sort of help our kids sort of re-enter the world socially. But if they're feeling okay and they are getting some kind of in real life interpersonal interactions going, I wouldn't be too concerned about it.
Yeah, we've been having little play dates with very few kids, socially distanced, and it's really made a huge, huge difference for kids to be able to just interact with a few people and have a little triangle or circle. We have time for 2 more questions. Let's see what we have. Paula from LA has a 4th grader. How can we be more confident that our children are retaining new material they learn? And what specific curriculum should we emphasize given the current state of our country? The current state of everything?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you think kids are retaining what they're learning when they're doing distance learning versus in-person learning?
I definitely think there is a big difference. In school, kids are taking cues from each other and they're discussing, and they're, it's a whole different energetic difference, and it's a different experience, obviously. Again, I would just return to the point of not putting too much pressure on kids or yourselves to make sure that their academic achievement is at whatever status you feel it needs to be. I think take it easy on yourself, take it easy on your kids. And that said, I think the best way to kind of assess what's happening at school is to talk to them about it, to have them teach you things, and to, try to build out some sort of extension activities based on what they're really interested in. I think those kind of natural extensions and organic conversations and keeping them excited about what they're learning, building bridges from their interests to what they're learning. All of those things, I think, are the best way to keep in touch with what they're retaining.
Dr. Klock, any thoughts on how well kids can retain when they're doing distance learning?
Yeah, it is for sure. It's a challenge. I think I just really echo what Chrissy says. I think we're not going to be in this forever. I know it feels like it the longer it goes on. Kids are so resilient. They are learning right now. It may not be exactly what we would have expected, but I really believe that they will catch up when they're back at school. I do think there's value in sort of finding those academic lessons in real life. So maybe if you're worried about that elementary schoolers, arithmetic skills, use this opportunity to go shopping and have them make change with the money, right? Or just finding those lessons. You go to Wide Open School and find there's so many fantastic classes being offered on there. It's such a great resource if you're feeling like you want to sort of supplement what they're getting. And then also sleep, making sure they're sleeping, because actually that's where we consolidate our memory. So what we've learned during the day is our brain's still working at it at night while we sleep. So that would just be, from the medical perspective, another tip.
Well, Chrissy and Dr. Klock, we are about out of time. I just want to thank you all for sharing this invaluable information. And for those who are watching right now, I'm sure that you're going through periods of anxiety and just feeling challenged, but just know that we really are all in this together, and you are not alone, and that there are so many resources. If you just go to commonsense.org, you can find out about so many things, and it can direct you to whatever you're looking for. So please don't forget to seek that resource out. Chrissy, Dr. Klock, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, and thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.